I bet you've wondered if the world is getting more violent, right? It's a question that's probably crossed your mind while scrolling through news headlines or watching the latest crime drama. Well, buckle up, because we're about to dive into this mind-bending topic and explore whether our world is really becoming a more dangerous place. I'm your host from The Curious Orbit, and we're about to embark on a journey through time, data, and human perception to uncover the truth about violence in our world. Okay, so let's start by wrapping our heads around this big question. When we talk about violence, what exactly do we mean? Are we talking about wars, crime, domestic abuse, or all of the above? The thing is, violence comes in many forms, and to really understand if it's increasing or decreasing, we need to look at the bigger picture. Throughout history, humans have been, well, pretty violent. From ancient battles to medieval torture methods, our past is filled with some pretty gruesome stuff. But does that mean we were more violent back then? Or are we just more aware of violence now because of how connected we are? Let's take a trip back in time, shall we? Imagine yourself in the Middle Ages, just trying to live your best peasant life. But you've got to worry about plagues, invading armies, and maybe even a witch hunt or two. Life expectancy was low, and violence was a daily reality for many people. Fast forward to the 20th century, and we've got 2 world wars, numerous genocides, and the constant threat of nuclear annihilation. Yikes. Now this might surprise you, but despite all this violence in our past, some researchers argue that we're actually living in the most peaceful time in human history. I know, right? It sounds crazy, but stick with me. Now you might be wondering, how can we possibly measure violence across history? Well, let's look at some numbers. Researchers use various metrics to track violence like homicide rates, war casualties, and reports of domestic abuse. And when we look at these numbers over time, we see some surprising trends. For example, did you know that the global homicide rate has been steadily declining since the Middle Ages? In medieval Europe, you had about a 1 in 100 chance of being murdered. Today, it's closer to 1 in 100,000 in most developed countries. That's a pretty big improvement. Okay, so if violence is actually decreasing, why does it feel like the world is getting more dangerous? Well, this is where our brains play a little trick on us. You see, humans are hardwired to pay attention to threats and negative information. It's an evolutionary thing that helped keep our ancestors alive. Enter the media. News outlets know that violence and danger grab our attention, so they tend to focus on these stories. It's not that they're lying to us, but they are giving us a biased sample of what's happening in the world. So when we're bombarded with headlines about crimes and conflicts, our brains start to think that's the norm, even if it's not representative of the bigger picture. Now let's talk about the elephant in the room: technology. Our smartphones and social media feeds have basically turned us all into instant news reporters. See something scary? Tweet about it. Witness a crime? Post it on Facebook. This constant stream of information means we're more aware of violence than ever before, even if it's not actually happening more often. But it's not all bad news. Technology has also given us better tools to track and study violence. We can now collect data on a global scale, identify patterns, and even predict where violence might occur. This information is crucial for developing strategies to prevent violence and make our world safer. Let's zoom out and look at the big picture of global conflicts. The 20th century saw some of the deadliest wars in human history, with World War II alone claiming an estimated 85 million lives. That's about 3% of the world's population at the time. Pretty sobering, right? But check this out. Since World War II, we've actually seen a decline in the number and scale of interstate wars. The creation of international organizations like the UN, economic interdependence, and the spread of democracy have all played a role in reducing large-scale conflicts. Of course, we still have wars and conflicts today, but they tend to be smaller in scale and often involve non-state actors. Now let's talk about a form of violence that often happens behind closed doors: domestic violence. This is a tricky one to measure because it's often underreported. But thanks to increased awareness and better reporting mechanisms, we're getting a clearer picture of the problem. The good news is that in many countries, rates of domestic violence have been declining over the past few decades. This is largely due to changing social norms, improved legal protections, and support services for victims. But we still have a long way to go. And the COVID-19 pandemic has shown us how quickly progress can be reversed when people are stuck at home in stressful situations. All right, time to talk about everyone's favorite topic, social media. We love to hate it, and we hate to love it. But how does it affect our perception of violence? Well, social media can be like a megaphone for our fears. When we see violent content shared and reshared, it can make us feel like danger is lurking around every corner. But it's not all doom and scrolling. Social media has also been a powerful tool for raising awareness about violence and organizing movements for change. It's a double-edged sword, amplifying both our fears and our calls for justice. So, what can we do about violence in our world? Well, one of the most powerful tools we have is education. When people understand the root causes of violence and learn non-violent ways to resolve conflicts, amazing things can happen. Countries that invest in education tend to see lower rates of violence over time. And it's not just about formal education. Raising awareness about different forms of violence can lead to big changes. For example, as more people have become aware of the harm caused by corporal punishment, many countries have banned it in schools and homes. It's a great example of how changing attitudes can lead to changing behaviors. So what's the verdict? Is the world getting more violent? Well, the data suggests that overall, we're actually becoming less violent as a species. But, and this is a big but, our perception of violence is heavily influenced by media, technology, and our own cognitive biases. The challenge for the future is to continue this positive trend while also addressing new forms of violence that might emerge. The future is in our hands, and understanding these trends is the first step toward shaping it. And there you have it, folks. A whirlwind tour of violence throughout human history. Pretty mind-bending, right? If you enjoyed this deep dive into the data and psychology behind violence, why not join us for more adventures in curiosity? Hit that subscribe button and become part of the Curious Orbit family. Together, we'll keep exploring the big questions that shape our world. Until next time, stay curious.